the cool tile beneath my bare soles brought me back to the present moment, as I stood motionless in my beachfront property's kitchen. Once more, my device illuminated with a familiar alert, one I couldn't seem to escape no matter where I went. Unanswered attempt. Father. The digital counter at the screen's upper edge blinked its accusation at me. 42. The number struck me as absurd, representing more attempts at connection than he'd made throughout my entire existence combined. Beyond the transparent panels, coastal winds from the Atlantic pressed insistently against the reinforced glass, while rhythmic sounds of breaking surf maintained their eternal pattern, typically a source of comfort. On this particular morning, however, those soothing sounds only amplified the emptiness echoing through my residence. Before we continue further down this path, I should mention that when those connection attempts flooded in, I clutched an untouched ceramic vessel filled with morning brew. My gaze remained fixed on my ghostly image, reflected in the glass barrier, attempting to comprehend how my familial bonds had disintegrated with such velocity. And if you're receiving this story at this very moment, I find myself wondering about your current situation. What occupies your time as you absorb these events? Perhaps you're in motion, managing household tasks, settling into your preferred seating. I pose this question because when these events unfolded, I occupied this exact kitchen space, anticipating a December celebration that was meant to mark a turning point. The device brightened once more, prompting me to flip it presentation side down against the granite surface, because witnessing his identifier another time felt unbearable. The landscape visible through my window appeared bathed in warmth and golden light. Yet within my torso, something dense continued its descent. I pressed my weight against the counter's edge, experiencing the chilled stone beneath my open hands. My thoughts replayed everything in an endless circuit. The digital communication that initiated this cascade, the manner in which those words struck, the way I fixated on that correspondence until my vision blurred. Strangely enough, it commenced with me seeking something uncomplicated. 7 days prior, I'd transmitted a message to Father inquiring about his December gift preferences. This represented my annual ritual, despite his consistent pattern of deflection, or instructions not to expend resources, or redirecting discussions toward my sibling Lydia and her flawless domestic arrangement. That particular morning, I chose to attempt once more. Perhaps stubborn optimism represents a pattern that expires gradually. His response arrived as a single statement. This occasion includes only genuine family members. Nothing additional. No clarification. No expression of regret. Not even acknowledgement of my identity. Shock coursed through me, yet I transmitted a brief reply stating no inconvenience existed. I absorbed those words while positioned in my sleeping quarters in Clearwater, with dawn's illumination spreading across the wooden surfaces. I retain memory of that comforting brightness touching my feet, because the verbal content felt precisely opposite, frigid and dismissive, resembling a portal being sealed without advance notice. I lowered myself onto my sleeping platform's perimeter and maintained visual contact with the device until the display dimmed into darkness. That singular sentence dislodged something internal that had maintained its grip for countless years. I surveyed my chamber, observing the luggage I'd already retrieved and the collection of wrapped parcels I'd prepared for my young relatives. I'd secured my transportation home multiple weeks earlier. I consistently returned home, even when it resembled entering a dwelling where no accommodation existed for me, even when Mother generated commentary about my geographical distance, even when Father labeled me his challenging offspring, as though that justified my perpetual outsider status. Following that message's arrival, I terminated my travel arrangements immediately upon that platform's edge, not driven by fury, but rather through quiet acknowledgement that I'd been investing excessive effort across excessive duration. My entire existence had constituted some variation of me positioned externally to my own bloodline, maintaining hope they might register my continued presence. The coastal residence had transformed into an emblem of the existence I constructed to survive those emotions. I'd acquired it merely months before, a $3 million property featuring pale timber surfaces and extensive window installations capturing every variation of twilight. I purchased it following years of intense dedication within a modest technology enterprise in Denver. I numbered among the initial technical specialists who persisted through every extended evening, every directional shift, every period when compensation arrived delayed while aspirations remained vigorous. When the organization ultimately sold for $300 million, I departed with slightly beyond $9 million, sufficient resources to experience my first genuine respiration. Yet even following that achievement, I never disclosed more than fundamental details to my bloodline. They never requested information. They never desired specifics about my professional endeavors. They scarcely comprehended my occupation. Lydia represented their source of pride, the exemplary one, the reliable one, the one who'd provided them descendants. I represented the offspring who'd drifted excessively westward and selected an existence they couldn't comprehend. Therefore, I constructed my own, and I selected Georgia because when you mature in a location resembling Wisconsin where frozen seasons extend like prolonged gray narratives, you commence fantasizing about warmth, about atmosphere that doesn't assault your skin, about awakening to avian sounds instead of your adjacent residents scraping frozen precipitation from vehicle glass. When I initially entered this coastal residence, the atmosphere carried faint traces of brine and tropical fruit. The property representative continued discussing dimensional measurements, but I exclusively perceived space for respiration, space that resembled an existence I could claim without justification. I completed the financial transaction and secured the entrance behind me that afternoon, understanding this location would contain both the future I was selecting and the history I was attempting to transcend. And that returns me to that morning in the kitchen. The morning when the device wouldn't cease its alerts, because the individuals who once generated my feelings of inadequacy had suddenly determined they required me or desired something from me, or prioritized appearances over authenticity. I retrieved the device again, not to respond, merely to observe. The unanswered attempts had climbed from 42 to 43. The crimson numeral pulsed once before the display faded. I gripped it briefly and pressed it against my torso, not seeking comfort, but to anchor myself. For the first occasion in my existence, I wasn't the individual pursuing a position at the gathering. They represented the ones extending toward me, and I possessed no comprehension yet regarding how distant this tempest would journey. I exclusively understood one certainty. The communication that initiated all of this had fractured something accessible that was never going to seal identically again. I approached the transparent barrier and gazed toward the waterline just as the sun elevated further. The Atlantic shimmered like something animate and constant. A portion of me questioned whether tranquility consistently arrived with this variety of silent forewarning before everything transformed. I maintained that position for an extended period with the device in my grasp, absorbing the wave sounds and attempting to regulate my respiration, understanding profoundly that whatever arrived next would pull me back to a location I believed I'd already escaped. Because to comprehend why that single brief message damaged me in that manner, you would require vision of my origins. You would require accompanying me backward into a dwelling in northern Wisconsin, where frozen seasons persisted half-annually, and the cold wasn't exclusively beyond the transparent barriers. It occupied our kitchen gathering space. It traveled in the vehicle during religious institution journeys. It provided my evening comfort more reliably than either of my parents ever accomplished. Our municipality was sufficiently modest that everybody understood who belonged to whom. Individuals knew me as Frederick and Patricia Montgomery's younger offspring. Most of them couldn't even retain my given identifier. They retained memory of my sibling, though. Lydia with the lustrous hair and the effortless smile, and the academic records that mother preserved in a protective folder like sacred documentation. From external perspective, we resembled one of those bloodlines individuals' position on December greeting cards, a dual-level dwelling with forest shutters, a modest entrance that mother decorated every December with circular greenery and a sequence of pale illuminations. Father performed in the vocal ensemble at our modest, pale religious institution. Lydia in every educational performance and every annual publication committee photograph. Me walking dual steps behind them in my oversized boots, attempting not to slide on the frozen surface. Within the dwelling, it experienced differently. When I contemplate childhood, the initial sound arriving to consciousness isn't amusement. It's the heating apparatus activating during nocturnal hours, rattling and exhaling like it was equally exhausted of maintaining everything together as I was. I determined quite early that in our bloodline, attention represented a restricted resource, and Lydia had claimed priority on it before I even arrived here. She didn't accomplish it to be malicious. It was simply the atmosphere she respired. Educational instructors loved her. Males followed her around by 10th year. Religious institution ladies pinched her facial features when she performed solos and informed Mother that she must be exceptionally proud. They were proud. They vocalized it audibly. They wore it like a frozen season coat secured up to the facial area. My memories of my own modest victories are quieter. In 5th educational year, I won first position at the regional scientific fair for a presentation about solar power. My instructor generated a significant response and provided me a special emblem to wear on my garment. At the recognition assembly, I kept scanning the seating for my parents, but exclusively Mother appeared. She occupied the rear section, checked her timepiece frequently, and departed immediately after Lydia transmitted that she required transportation home from vocal practice. Afterward in the vehicle, I gripped the modest trophy in my lap and informed her about how the evaluators stated my presentation was impressive. She smiled and said that was pleasant, then spent the remaining drive discussing how busy they were getting, ready for Lydia's significant recital. Frederick's preferred narrative to inform individuals was how Lydia had been performing before she could communicate properly. Mine was how I dismantled an aged radio when I was 10 exclusively to examine how it operated, and assembled it again. To this day, I don't understand if anyone in my bloodline even registered the radio had stopped crackling for a few hours that afternoon. December was the worst of it. If I close my eyes, I can still detect the pine and cinnamon and hear the same aged melodies on the sound system. Father occupied his reclining chair with a vessel of morning brew and observed Lydia distribute the gifts, ensuring everyone witnessed the substantial ones with her identifier on them. Mother fluttered around with a waste receptacle, collecting wrapping material. I occupied the surface, half in the circle and half external to it. I used to pour my whole consciousness into the things I created for them. One year, I spent weeks creating Father a scarf from leftover fiber an elderly adjacent neighbor had provided me. The loops were crooked, but it was the longest thing I had ever created. Every loop felt like a little piece of my hope. I wrapped it in plain material and inscribed his identifier on it in careful block characters. He opened it between a new set of golf implements from Mother and a leather currency holder from Lydia. He extracted it, elevated it, and laughed a little. Then he wrapped it once around his neck, said, "Thanks, offspring," and went right back to admiring the implements. The scarf ended up on the rear of a dining chair and then in the corridor closet. By New Year's, I never witnessed it again. That was the year I stopped creating handmade gifts. It wasn't that they were malicious to me. They fed me. They clothed me. On the surface, it all looked acceptable. But there exists a variety of neglect that occurs while everyone smiles for photographs. They request how educational institution is, but don't wait for the response. They inform you they love you but don't see you. You transform into the extra position setting at the table. There, if required, easy to forget when not. Lydia and I shared a chamber until she departed for higher education. Her section was covered with posters and photographs and ribbons. Mine had one modest bookshelf and a desk positioned under the transparent barrier. On frozen evenings, I would occupy there with a second-hand computer that Father's associate from employment had provided us when his workplace upgraded. The cooling apparatus hummed so audibly that Lydia complained she couldn't hear the television in the living chamber. I wore sound isolation devices and taught myself basic programming from library volumes, while the frozen precipitation accumulated outside. Sometimes I would get excited about making a little program operate and carry my portable computer into the kitchen to demonstrate to Father. He would observe for a second, nod, and change the subject to Lydia's latest scholarship offer. At some point, I stopped attempting to demonstrate him anything. I tucked my pride into the same location I had stuffed all those aged December cards. By the time I was in secondary educational institution, everyone in the municipality understood that Lydia would go somewhere special. She did. a pleasant private higher educational institution in New Hampshire that Father discussed every time someone requested how the bloodline was doing. When individuals requested about me, he would state that I was still determining it. He never stated it unkindly, but it stung more than any sharp word could have. Final year, my guidance counselor extracted me aside and informed me quietly that my academic performance and examination scores could get me into a quality engineering program out of state. She slid a brochure across her desk with a campus in Arizona printed on the front, all palm vegetation and blue atmosphere. I traced the outlines of those plants with my finger, like someone touching another existence. When I informed my parents about that offer, Mother frowned. "Arizona is so distant," she stated. "Why not stay closer? Maybe state university or community higher education for a bit." Father shrugged and stated that not everybody had to depart home to be content. Lydia had settled at that prestigious higher educational institution just a day's drive away, and they were satisfied with that. I remember standing at the kitchen basin, experiencing the hot liquid on my hands as I washed dishes, and thinking that if I remained, I would disappear completely. Maybe some females are built to flourish in one modest municipality. I understood I wasn't one of them. I selected the institution in Arizona. I signed the documentation, accepted the scholarship, and when Father informed me he didn't comprehend why I wanted to run so distant, I just smiled and informed him I wanted to experience what warm weather felt like at December. Back then, I couldn't have understood that one day I would be living in a dwelling where palm vegetation really did sway outside my transparent barriers in December. I exclusively understood that Wisconsin felt like a coat that no longer fit, and no one was going to assist me remove it. The evening before I departed for higher educational institution, I occupied on the front steps with my luggage packed beside me, observing toward the street illuminations glowing on the quiet road. Lydia had already driven back to New Hampshire. Mother was inside folding laundry. Father was in his chair observing some late athletic game, the sound drifting through the screen entrance behind me. I observed up at the black atmosphere and made a private promise that I didn't vocalize audibly. One day I would construct an existence where I didn't have to request to be witnessed. One day I would have a dwelling that felt warm all the way through, not just on the temperature control. What I didn't understand then was that even after you depart the dwelling you matured in, its voice follows you. It appears in the manner you overwork, in the manner you flinch when your device buzzes with a communication from bloodline. It waits for quiet mornings years later in a kitchen distant from that aged entrance, and it still understands how to press your sensitivities with 4 little words. This occasion includes only genuine family members. I walked back inside the coastal residence with my device still warm in my grasp. The tide had shifted outside, but something inside me felt even more unsteady. I attempted to shake it off as I stepped into the kitchen. The atmosphere smelled faintly of citrus from the cleaning solution I had used earlier. The quiet felt heavier than usual, as if the barriers understood what was arriving long before I did. I opened the cooling storage, stared at a container of eggs I wasn't hungry for, then closed it again. My consciousness kept replaying the curt communication from Father. The words, "You are not part of the genuine bloodline this occasion," occupied somewhere between my torso and my stomach, like a stone that wouldn't move. I extracted out a chair at the modest dining surface and occupied down, rubbing the tension between my eyebrows with dual fingers. My device buzzed again. This time it was a message from Constance, my maternal relative on Mother's section. The one individual in the entire bloodline who had never once generated me feel like an outsider. "Are you doing acceptable, offspring?" I typed back gradually. "I just require a second." Father stated exclusively genuine bloodline this occasion. Her reply arrived almost instantly. "That male forgets who raised him. You arrive, spend December with us in Vermont if you desire. We got plenty of accommodation." I smiled at the display, but my throat tightened instead of easing. I did desire that comfort. Her warm kitchen and cedar-scented dwelling. Her easy manner of observing at me that never carried disappointment. But I had spent years informing myself that one day Father would witness me for who I actually was. I had desired this December to be that day. I pressed my chair back and walked to the living chamber. The coastal residence was bright, even at evening with soft illuminations tucked into corners and the wide transparent barriers catching reflections of the Atlantic. This location still felt unreal to me. My own coastal residence was purchased with my own resources after more than a decade of scraping by in technology. Long, lonely hours at my desk. Long evenings debugging programming until my eyes burned. Every modest promotion, every ignored attempt from home whenever I desired to share positive information. All of it had led me here. I descended down onto the furniture and let my head fall back. The sound of the surf drifted through the sliding entrances. It usually calmed me. Tonight, it exclusively made the location feel larger, emptier. My device buzzed again. This time it was Bridget, my aged chamber companion from Portland and one of my closest associates. She almost never transmitted at evening unless something was incorrect. Witnessed your communication earlier. You sound off. Desire to communicate? I contacted her. She picked up before the initial alert finished. Hey, what occurred? Her voice was warm and constant. I felt myself loosen just a little. Frederick stated he exclusively desires a genuine bloodline for December. I stated I desired to surprise him with something, and he just sealed the entrance. There was a long respiration on her section. That stings. I am sorry, honey. I stared at a spot on the ceiling until it blurred. I purchased this coastal residence thinking I could finally invite them somewhere pleasant. I thought it would matter. I was even attempting to determine what father really appreciates, so I could get him a gift that didn't feel like something from a fuel station rack. I don't understand why I bothered. You bothered because you are still attempting to heal something that was never yours to carry. Her voice softened. You have accomplished everything correct. Sometimes parents don't witness the matured individual in front of them. They exclusively witness the offspring they built in their consciousnesses. I let her words descend in. They stung, but in a different manner. A clarifying manner. I estimate I just desired one celebration where I didn't have to pretend I was acceptable with being the extra. Bridget generated a modest sound of comprehension. Then don't pretend. Not this occasion. Arrive, spend it with individuals who desire you. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped. The idea warmed me, but there was something inside me that pressed back. I don't desire to run. I desire to stand still for once. Bridget paused. Then stand here in this coastal residence. Make it yours. Invite your individuals. You are not alone, Harper. You have more bloodline than the ones who share your last identifier. I swallowed hard. Her words settled somewhere profound. Maybe you are correct. I remained on the device with her for a few more minutes while she informed me about the initial heavy frozen precipitation in Portland and her spouse attempting to repair their aged heating apparatus with video platform tutorials. I laughed once or twice. Then we stated positive evening. The coastal residence was quiet again. I got up and walked down the corridor when I pressed open the entrance to the guest chamber across from mine. I stood there for a moment. I had not decorated it much yet. Exclusively a soft cotton throw on the sleeping platform and a tall illumination device in the corner. But suddenly, I could picture Constance there. I could picture Bridget and her spouse on the furniture, observing some silly December motion picture. I could picture relatives who had never judged me, associates from employment who were planning to spend the celebrations alone, the individuals who had appeared for me over the years in manners my own parents never quite managed. The thought surprised me. It was like someone had opened a transparent barrier in my torso. I walked back to the living chamber and occupied at the coffee surface. My portable computer was still open from earlier. I clicked on the calendar application. The dates for December week glowed back at me. I tapped one finger against the surface. An idea was forming. Not quite a plan, but something close. Something sharp and warm at the same occasion. I closed the portable computer gradually and set it aside. I required to think. I required to respire. I required to decide whether I was about to flee from the pain or walk straight through it. Outside, the wind shifted, and a palm branch tapped lightly against the transparent barrier. It made me observe toward the waterline again. The coastal area was empty except for a singular set of impressions near the liquid. Mine. A thin line of evidence that I had been here, that I existed, that I belonged somewhere in this existence. I occupied very still, letting that settle in me. My device illuminated again on the coffee surface. I stared at it for a long moment before lifting it. Constance again. Contact me if you require. I am conscious. I typed back. Not yet, but soon. Then I set the device presentation down and observed around the coastal residence once more. The atmosphere felt different, less like a hiding location, more like a beginning. I stood up and walked toward the glass entrances, pressed my palm to the cool surface, the Atlantic dark and endless beyond it. For the initial occasion since Father's communication, I felt something close to clarity taking shape. Whatever occurred next, I wasn't going to shrink myself to fit into anyone's idea of a genuine bloodline. The exclusive question left was what I was going to construct in position of the aged patterns I had finally grown exhausted of carrying. I took a slow respiration, understanding I was correct on the edge of something larger than damaged emotions or one hurtful message. And that was precisely the moment a new communication flashed across my device display, bright in the dim chamber, extracting my respiration short again. It was from Constance. She had transmitted exclusively a few words. Checking on you. You sounded shaky earlier. I stared at the little gray message bubble for a long moment. Then I accomplished something I had not accomplished in a long duration. I contacted her without overthinking it. She picked up on the second alert, breathless, like she had hurried to the device. There she is, my preferred relative, Constance stated, that familiar warmth already softening something tight in my torso. Inform me what your father accomplished now. I laughed once, a short, exhausted sound. I informed her about the communication, how I had extended toward regarding December, and how he had responded with that line about genuine bloodline, how it wasn't the initial occasion he had frozen me out, but somehow this occasion it landed differently. Constance didn't interrupt. I could hear a television murmuring low in the background and the faint clink of dishes. She was probably standing in her little kitchen up in Burlington, one hand on her hip, shaking her head. When I finished, she let out a long respiration. That male was stubborn at 8 years aged, and he never transformed, she stated. But let me vocalize this, Harper. Blood doesn't consistently understand how to act like bloodline. Sometimes the individuals who appear are not the ones on your bloodline structure. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. I hate that it still damages this much, I stated. I am matured. I have a quality occupation, a roof, and resources in the financial institution. But one message from him and I feel 10 years aged again. That is because you never obtained what you should have obtained from him, she stated softly. When a father doesn't witness you, that wound stays tender. There was a pause, and then she added, You understand you are welcome here for December. Me and Martin would love to have you. I will create that chocolate dessert you appreciate. I smiled. I could almost detect her kitchen through the device. Butter, sugar, the faint scent of wood smoke from the stove. I understand, I stated, and I might still accept you up on that someday. But correct now I am occupying in this substantial dwelling in Georgia, and I keep thinking about all the individuals who have actually been there for me, and I am commencing to question why I have never attempted to position them in the same chamber. Constance was quiet for a second. Then she laughed. A warm, surprised sound. Now that she stated sounds like an idea. We remained on the device while I walked through the coastal residence, my bare feet whispering against the surface. I informed her how many sleeping chambers there were, how the guest chambers had their own bathing facilities, how the living chamber opened straight out to the platform in the coastal area beyond. This location was meant for more than me eating delivery on the furniture, I stated. Then fill it up, she responded. Invite your genuine bloodline. The words occupied in the atmosphere between us. Genuine bloodline. For the initial occasion, that phrase didn't make me flinch. It made me curious. After we disconnected, I occupied at the dining surface with my portable computer and a legal pad. Aged pattern. Whenever existence felt excessively substantial, I created lists. Lists made chaos feel like something I could grasp. At the summit of the page, I inscribed December, then underlined it. The initial identifier I inscribed was Constance and Martin. That was easy. They had opened their dwelling to me so many occasions when I was an offspring. When things obtained tense in my parents' dwelling, Mother would transmit me up to visit her sibling for a weekend. Constance never made it feel like exile. She made it feel like a sanctuary. Then I added Iris. Technically, she was my relative, Constance's offspring, but she had consistently felt more like a younger sibling. She was the one who would occupy with me on the back steps at bloodline reunions when the matured individuals obtained excessively loud whispering jokes to make me laugh. After that, the identifiers arrived faster. Tessa from Charlotte, who had been my chamber companion my second year in higher educational institution when I had initially moved to Arizona. She was the one who shoved a cupcake into my hands the day my initial serious male companion terminated me and informed me that any male who couldn't handle a female with opinions didn't deserve dessert. Owen from Denver, a fellow technical specialist who had quietly slipped me a financial document once when our enterprise went through a rough patch and half the team compensation were delayed. He had just stated, "Compensate me back when you can," and never mentioned it again. I had compensated him back with interest, but the kindness stuck. There was also Margaret and Vincent, the retired couple who had lived across the corridor from me in Portland for a few years before I moved to Georgia. When my vehicle broke down, Vincent had driven me to employment for a week. When I had the flu so severe I couldn't stand, Margaret had left soup at my entrance and checked on me every few hours. I observed at the list and felt something loosen in my torso. None of these individuals shared my last identifier. None of them had ever occupied at my parents' formal dining surface, but every one of them had appeared for me when existence had obtained messy. I extracted my portable computer closer and opened a flight location. My fingers hovered over the keys. For a moment, the aged voice arrived back, the one that sounded suspiciously like my father. "Who do you think you are? Flying individuals across the nation, attempting to perform hostess in some prestigious dwelling." I sealed my eyes and lifted my shoulders, attempting to shake that voice off. Then I remembered working until 2 a.m. at 28 years aged, staring at displays full of damaged programming. I remembered living on inexpensive noodles, so my savings could stretch 1 more month. I remembered the day our little organization obtained that acquisition offer for $300 million, and my supervisor took me aside. He had informed me what my equity was now worth, just beyond $9 million. Sufficient for a comfortable existence. Sufficient to select something different. I had accomplished that. Not my parents, not Lydia, not anyone else. Me. I opened my eyes and commenced searching for flights. Initially, I observed at Burlington to Atlanta, then Charlotte, then Denver, Portland. The values made me grimace, especially for the celebration week, but not in the aged familiar manner that tightened my stomach. This occasion, it was more like a practical sting, like extracting off a bandage. It damaged, but it was doable. I commenced transmitting communications to Constance. I inscribed that I desired her and Martin and Iris to arrive down and spend December on the coastal area. I informed her I would cover flights and a location to remain. To Tessa, I stated that if she didn't already have plans, I would love for her to escape Charlotte traffic and arrive occupy under palm vegetation with me for a week. To Owen, I inscribed that I understood he usually remained in municipality for the celebrations, but if he felt like trading cold pizza and video games for Atlantic atmosphere and a genuine sleeping platform, I had accommodation. To Margaret and Vincent, I kept it simple. I stated that their kindness over the years had meant more to me than they understood, and I would be honored if they would let me return the favor with a little sunshine and home-prepared food. Then I positioned the device presentation down and waited. The reply commenced trickling in faster than I expected. Constance contacted me instead of transmitting. Her voice broke a little when she stated that no one had ever flown her anywhere for December in her entire existence. Martin hollered in the background that he was purchasing a new pair of fishing shorts just for Georgia. Iris squealed so loud I had to extract the device away from my auditory organ. Tessa transmitted a sequence of communications that all condensed down to affirmative, and also, I am bringing wine. Owen responded in his dry manner that sunshine and a guest chamber were an upgrade from his usual celebration plans with frozen dinners and reruns. Margaret transmitted that she and Vincent would be delighted as long as she could spend at least one afternoon in my kitchen demonstrating me how to create her pecan dessert properly. I read each communication twice. My eyes blurred once or twice, but not from grief this occasion. It was something else, something I couldn't quite identify. By the occasion I closed my portable computer that evening, there were confirmed flights and arrival occasions saved in my calendar. In less than dual weeks, this quiet coastal residence would be full of voices and footsteps and individuals who had selected me without conditions. I stood in the middle of the living chamber and turned gradually, letting my eyes trace the space that would soon hold them. The furniture where Constance would occupy with her feet tucked under her. The corner where Owen would probably park himself with a volume. The stretch of coastal area where Iris and Tessa would take 1,000 photographs. Father's words about genuine bloodline echoed faintly in the back of my consciousness, but they didn't land the same manner anymore. As I walked toward the guest chambers to commence thinking about where everyone would sleep, I felt it clearly for the initial occasion. I wasn't just reacting to being sealed out. I was constructing something of my own. The aged narrative about where I did and didn't belong was still there. But for once, it wasn't the loudest voice in the chamber. I woke before the sun, the soft hum of the ceiling cooling apparatus carrying a little chill across the chamber. For a moment, I just lay there, absorbing to the slow press of the waves outside the transparent barrier. The dwelling felt different now, warmer somehow, as if it already understood company was arriving. I stretched, rubbed my eyes, and occupied up with the quiet impact of my feet touching the cool surface. I had barely made it to the kitchen when my device buzzed with the initial confirmation of the day, a message from Owen. Landing in Atlanta at 3 p.m. Will transportation be required? Then a second communication. Do you have sweet tea? I laughed under my respiration. I typed back that I would create something fresh before he obtained here. By 8 a.m, I had morning brew preparing and a modest notebook open on the counter. I inscribed down arrival occasions, airport collections, and the identifiers of the chambers I desired each individual to have. My handwriting grew crooked in the margins, but the list was commencing to resemble a plan instead of a wild idea. The coastal residence grew brighter as the sun rose. Illumination spilled across the living chamber, catching the pale blues of the throw cushions and the warm tan of the furniture. I kept pausing to absorb in the perspective, that endless stretch of Atlantic that still accomplished something soft to my torso every day. The occasion I observed at it, this location felt like a possibility. Around mid-morning, I stepped out onto the platform to shake the dust off the outdoor cushions. The atmosphere was warm and clean. I could detect faint brine lifting from the coastal area. I was adjusting one of the substantial cushions when the female adjacent door walked over to the low fence line. She was gripping a grocery receptacle and wearing sun protection glasses, even though the atmosphere was barely bright. You must be the new one, she stated without smiling. I straightened and brushed my hands off on my shorts. Affirmative. I moved in a few weeks prior. She nodded once. Her tone was clipped. Just so you understand, this community is quiet around the celebrations. Individuals around here appreciate peace. We don't accomplish loud gatherings or substantial parties. I blinked. I had not stated a word about parties, but something in her voice made my shoulders stiffen. I stated I comprehended. She provided another curt nod and walked away across her outdoor space, her sandals impacting sharply with each step. I observed her depart, then observed back at the cushions in my hands. The brightness of the morning dimmed just a little. Inside, I made myself focus on the growing task list. Clean the guest bathing facilities, stock the cooling storage, set out extra towels. I moved chamber to chamber with a constant rhythm, golden linens, and opening transparent barriers to let in the Atlantic atmosphere. It felt quality to prepare for individuals who actually desired to be here. By noon, Constance contacted. They were already at the Burlington airport, and Martin was attempting to convince the gate agent that his fishing gear counted as carry-on luggage. I could hear Iris laughing in the background, and the sound loosened something tight in my torso. We will witness you tonight, Constance stated. I cannot believe we are spending December in Georgia. After we disconnected, I stood in the middle of the living chamber, and attempted to picture their receptacles piled by the entrance. Constance's voice echoing through the dwelling. Martin slipping outside to examine the coastal area. Iris spinning in the middle of the living chamber taking photographs for her associates. It felt unreal in the optimal manner. I was setting out clean containers in the kitchen when another message arrived in. It was Tessa. Boarding soon. I purchased that blackberry wine you appreciate. Don't judge me. I smiled and set the device aside. Everything was arriving together. For once in my existence, I felt like the center of something, instead of the leftover part at the edge of the picture. By early afternoon, I was at the airport collecting Owen. He walked out of the sliding glass entrances wearing a faded shirt, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and a half-amused expression. "Well, observe at you," he stated as he climbed into the passenger seat. "Georgia suits you." I rolled my eyes but felt my facial features warm. We communicated the whole drive back, slipping easily into the variety of conversation that didn't require effort or performance. When we reached the coastal residence, he whistled low under his respiration. "This is where you live. You were being modest." I informed him it still felt strange to vocalize audibly. He nodded like he comprehended. We carried his receptacle inside. I demonstrated him to the guest chamber and provided him a few minutes alone while I created the sweet tea I promised. When he arrived back to the kitchen, he observed lighter, almost rested already. He took a consumption and nodded. Quality. Genuine quality. We settled into the living chamber for a bit. Communicate about employment and aged narratives from the Enterprise days. I realized how much I had missed being around someone who understood that part of my existence. A little after 3 in the afternoon, the entrance alert rang. I went to the entrance area and opened it to witness Margaret and Vincent standing there with modest overnight receptacles and bright smiles. "You live in paradise," Margaret stated, stepping inside. "My goodness, observe at this location." I embraced them both. Vincent removed his cap and wiped his forehead, shaking his head at the dimension of the living chamber. "This exceeds Portland by a long distance," he stated quietly. I assisted carry their receptacles to the guest chamber with the soft blue bedding and Atlantic perspective. Margaret whispered that she felt like she had stepped into a publication. By 4 in the afternoon, the coastal residence commenced to feel like a dwelling. Voices drifted from the kitchen and the living chamber. Owen and Vincent were already communicating about fishing. Margaret was opening cabinets to assist me decide where to position the dessert dishes. The warm sounds filled all the empty spaces I had pretended not to register before. I stepped out to the platform for a moment, letting the entrance fall softly sealed behind me. The atmosphere smelled of brine. The waves were constant. For a minute, I felt completely still inside, as if everything had finally fallen into position. That was when my device buzzed sharply. I glanced at the display, expecting another flight update. Instead, it was a notification. Identification from Iris, a photograph she had posted. I opened it gradually. In the picture, Owen was standing on the platform gripping a cold beverage, the Atlantic bright behind him. Margaret was in the corner of the frame, smiling at something out of perspective. The caption stated, "Celebration with Bloodline." My respiration caught. My finger hovered over the display. There were already commentaries. "Is that your relative dwelling? Where is this Georgia? Impressive." Then one more from Lydia. "Is father there too?" My torso tightened. I stared at the horizon. A low wind brushed against my legs. Somewhere inside the coastal residence, I heard amusement. It felt like it belonged to an existence I had just stepped out of. The device buzzed again. A second notification. Then a third. My identifier is being mentioned. Someone sharing the photograph. A tiny spark of apprehension illuminated at the foundation of my spine. Inside the dwelling, someone contacted my identifier, but I stood still on that platform with the device buzzing in my grasp, the photograph burning bright on the display, sensing that this moment was the one where everything would commence shifting again. And I was correct, though I didn't understand how correct until the notification commenced stacking up like falling frozen precipitation. Initially, it was just the usual thing. A few appreciations from Iris's associates. A couple of little hearts from individuals I didn't understand. Then I witnessed my last identifier in a commentary from someone back in Wisconsin. A female who had performed with Mother in the religious institution vocal ensemble since I was an offspring. Montgomery's in Georgia now. I witness. It appears beautiful. Another commentary appeared up under it. I thought they consistently accomplished December at dwelling. My torso tightened. It felt like being observed through a keyhole. Then I witnessed Lydia commentary 4 words that made my stomach flip. Is Father there too? My thumb hovered over the display. For a second, I actually considered responding, stating, negative. He is occupying in that same reclining chair in Wisconsin where he has occupied every December of my existence, stating he didn't invite me to that dwelling this occasion. Vocalize. I am not part of what he contacts a genuine bloodline. Instead, I hit the section button, and the device went dark. Inside, someone contacted my identifier again. I slid the entrance open and stepped back into the living chamber, slipping the device into my pocket like contraband. I didn't desire anyone to witness. Margaret was at the stove, stirring something in a pot, humming softly. Owen and Vincent were on the furniture arguing good-naturedly about which athletic team had the worst season. The television droned low in the background. The dwelling observed precisely the manner I had consistently imagined a celebration should observe. Individuals relaxed, voices layered without cutting. You all correct, honey? Margaret requested when she glanced over her shoulder. Acceptable, I stated. Just checking something. The falsehood tasted thin, but she didn't press. She just motioned toward the pot. Taste this sauce. Inform me if it requires more seasoning. I let myself descend into the rhythm of the evening. We opened a container of wine Tessa had carried in when she arrived an hour later, her luggage still by the entrance. She embraced me hard, sufficient to make me laugh, and held me at arm's length. Sun appears quality on you, she informed me. Charlotte has been nothing but gray. We consumed around the substantial wooden surface that it felt excessively large when I initially moved in. Tonight, there were not even sufficient chairs. Iris perched on a stool from the kitchen island. Thinking through a mouthful of mashed potatoes, Constance laughed at something Martin stated about Georgia insects. Once or twice, I caught myself leaning back just to absorb, attempting to memorize the sound. It wasn't until later when the dishes were piled in the basin and everyone had drifted off to different corners of the dwelling that I picked up my device again. The display brightened and my respiration caught. Unanswered attempts, it stated. Then a numeral that made my scalp prickle. 18. All from the same contact. Father. There were vocal communications, too. I stared at the little crimson dots lined up in a neat, accusing row. I carried the device quietly out onto the platform so no one would witness my facial features. The atmosphere was dark now. The stars faint against the glow from the waterline. The atmosphere smelled like brine and something sweet from one of the dwellings down the coastal area. I occupied on a lounge chair and finally pressed operate. The initial communication commenced with silence, a long respiration. Then my identifier spoken in that familiar, clipped manner. Harper, contact me back. His voice was tight. Where are you? Contact me. The second communication sounded different, sharper. I just witnessed some photographs. What is occurring? Why is the remainder of the bloodline down there with you? Why were we not informed about this? My hand tightened around the device. The third communication made my throat burn. Do you have any idea how this observes? Individuals are requesting us at religious institution what it is occurring. They think we expelled you out. I will not have individuals thinking this bloodline is falling apart. Contact me now. I absorbed one after another. His voice moved from confusion to fury like a needle swinging hard on a gauge. There was never a moment where he stated, "Are you all correct?" Or "I miss you," or "I would appreciate to comprehend." It was all about appearance, about how he and Mother observed occupying up there in that pale, clapboard religious institution, without their younger offspring in the seating area. In one communication, I could hear Mother in the background, her voice elevated and tight. "Inform her she requires to arrive dwelling," she stated. "Inform her we have consistently accomplished December here." In another vocal communication, He lowered his voice as if someone might overhear, even through the device. "Everybody witnessed that publication," he stated, "the one with the caption about Bloodline. You understand precisely what you are accomplishing." I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the cushion. Iris had not meant anything by the caption. She had just inscribed what she felt at the moment. Celebration with Bloodline. She had no idea how it would read to the individuals who had spent years deciding who counted as Bloodline and who didn't. I let the last communication operate. This one was shorter. "If you don't pick up this device by tonight," he stated, "don't expect us to pretend this never occurred." The vocal communication clicked off. The Atlantic filled the silence. I realized my shoulders were up around my auditory organs. I let them descend. Behind me, inside the glass, I could witness Margaret and Constance moving around the kitchen, stacking plates. Iris leaned against the island, scrolling on her device, her facial features illuminated up by the display. My individuals, the ones who had arrived with no guarantees, except that they desired to be here with me. The device buzzed again in my grasp, a message this occasion from Mother. "We require to communicate," she had inscribed. "Everyone up here is requesting questions. You positioned us in a terrible position." I read it twice. Not one word about how I felt. Not one word about the years I had occupied at their surface, attempting to make myself modest, sufficient not to be a burden. Something in me steadied instead of crumbling. I typed back gradually. "I will communicate when I am prepared. Not tonight." The little dots appeared like she was typing a reply. Then they disappeared. Nothing else arrived through. I occupied out there a long duration, absorbing to the waves and the muffled clink of dishes, experiencing fury and sadness, and a strange lightness swirling together. For the initial occasion in my existence, I wasn't sprinting to smooth things over. I was not the one contacting back over and over, desperate to repair something I had not damaged. At some point, the sliding entrance opened quietly behind me. Constance stepped onto the platform, her cardigan extracted tight around her shoulders. She occupied down on the chair beside mine with a modest exhalation. "You out here hiding too?" she requested gently. "Just obtaining some atmosphere," I stated. She tilted her head, studying my facial features. Her eyes were soft but sharp. Had that observation of someone who had witnessed more than individuals realize? "We heard the device buzzing all evening," she stated. "You don't have to inform me anything, but I am here if you desire to." I hesitated. Then I handed her the device already extracted up with the attempt log. Father's identifier fills the display like a repeating echo. She let out a low respiration. "He witnessed the photographs then," she stated quietly. "Observes like it," I responded. There was a long pause. We could hear the Atlantic respiring in and out. "Individuals up there are communicating," she stated at last. "Your mother contacted me earlier before we headed to the airport." She sounded rattled. She stated, "Individuals at religious institution have been whispering that something must have occurred for you to be in Georgia without them, and for us to be here with you." I observed out into the dark. "So it is about what other individuals think as usual." "Partly," she admitted. "Some of it is pride, some of it is fear. That municipality has a neat narrative. They don't understand what to accomplish when the picture obtains cracked." We occupied in silence for another moment. I could feel her turning something over in her consciousness. When she vocalized again, her voice had shifted. Lower, steadier. "Harper, there is something else," she stated. "Your father didn't just contact your mother and depart you those communications." I turned my head to observe at her. The entrance illumination threw a soft glow on her facial features. She observed suddenly older than she had that afternoon when she arrived through my front entrance with her luggage, and that substantial, excited smile. "He contacted me too," she stated. "Just before dinner, and you should probably understand what he requested me for." My fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. The entrance illumination slid a soft yellow wash across her facial features, but her eyes observed darker than usual. "What did he desire?" I requested, even though part of me already understood. Constance rubbed her thumb over the edge of her sleeve like she was attempting to erase something that wouldn't depart. He desired your address, she stated. He stated he required to witness you an individual. The words settled between us like a stone dropped in still liquid. For a second, all I could hear was the Atlantic, the long extraction of the tide against the coastal area. When? I requested. Early afternoon, she responded. Correct after lunch. We were finishing up some last-minute packing. He sounded unsettled but calm. Excessively calm. He stated he owed you an apology. He stated he didn't desire to argue on the device. He informed me he desired to arrive down and surprise you and make things correct. She swallowed and observed at me with the guilty eyes of someone who has accomplished a modest incorrect for what they believed was a substantial correct. I believed him, she added. I thought this was the miracle individuals communicate about at December. I didn't understand he had already departed you all those communications. A low ache spread through my torso, some mixture of fear, aged patterns, and something like disappointment. So you provided it to him, I stated. She nodded. I accomplished. I provided him the street and the dwelling numeral. He requested what airport he should fly into. I informed him about Atlanta. He stated he would check flights as soon as we disconnected. The practical part of my consciousness activated before the emotional part could swallow me whole. Burlington to Boston, Boston to Atlanta, or maybe another connecting location, and then down. Celebration travel, full flights, delays, missed connections, whatever he was experiencing. It still had to pass through airport security and airline schedules. So, he might be attempting to obtain here, I stated gradually. But he is not here yet. It will take him at least until tomorrow. Constance let out a respiration that had been caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. That is what I am thinking, she stated. It is not like he can jump on a vehicle and end up on your entrance in dual hours. It will take duration. I just didn't desire you walking into the kitchen tomorrow and discovering him standing there without forewarning. I observed out over the dark line of the liquid. The horizon was barely visible, just a thin difference between profound blue and black. Somewhere out there, the existence I had departed behind was spinning in its familiar cold orbit, attempting to extract me back in. Thank you for informing me, I stated. I understand you were exclusively attempting to assist. She extended across and compressed my hand. I desired this December to heal something, she stated, not tear it open wider. The sliding entrance whispered open behind us. I turned to witness Owen step onto the platform. The illumination from the kitchen framed him for a moment, before the softer glow of the entrance illumination took over. He observed at our facial features, and his expression shifted from casual to concerned an instant. Everything all correct? He requested. I attempted to respond, but the words tangled somewhere in my throat. Constance vocalized instead. Your father contacted me earlier, she stated to him, as if he were part of this bloodline council too. He is observing for her. He is attempting to obtain here. Owen glanced at me, then back at her. Tonight, he requested. Constance shook her head. Not likely. He exclusively commenced observing at flights this afternoon. You understand how travel is this occasion of year. If he obtains anything at all, it will probably be tomorrow. Owen moved closer and leaned on the railing beside me. His voice dropped just sufficient that I understood he was vocalizing to me, not just into the atmosphere. So, we have duration, he stated. That is something. You are not going to open that entrance and discover him standing there tonight. You obtain to decide how to utilize these hours before he appears up. I let my shoulders sag a little, the tension leaking out just sufficient to respire. The idea of him being on his manor made my stomach churn, but the thought of him appearing out of nowhere with no forewarning had been worse. Inside the dwelling, illumination and sound spilled through the glass. Iris's amusement rose above the clink of pans. Tessa was vocalizing something dramatic in her southern drawl. Margaret was humming what sounded like an aged hymn while she wrapped leftover food. The existence occurring in that dwelling felt genuine and warm and completely separate from the tempest forming hundreds of distances away. I should return in, I stated quietly. They don't require to spend this whole evening experiencing my anxiety. Constance provided me a soft observation with sympathy. "You don't have to pretend everything is acceptable," she stated. "Not with us." "I understand," I responded. "But I also understand that this is the initial December that has ever felt like it belonged to me. I would appreciate to live in it for one evening before it turns into something else." She exhaled, then nodded. "Acceptable sufficient," she stated. "We will deal with tomorrow when it arrives." She provided my arm one more compression and went back inside. Owen remained beside me for another moment, both of us observing the dark liquid. "You desire me adjacent when he arrives?" he requested. I thought about it. The offspring version of me desired to vocalize I would handle it alone. The matured female I was attempting to be understood better. "Affirmative," I stated, "but I may desire to communicate to him initially. Just me. I am not certain yet." He nodded. "I will be around." You vocalize the word. We went back into the coastal residence together. The warmth and illumination wrapped around me as soon as the entrance slid sealed. For a little while it almost swallowed the chill that had settled under my stated dermal layer. The remainder of the evening passed in modest, ordinary moments that felt precious, precisely because I understood how fragile they were. Constance finished her dessert and insisted everyone have a slice. Margaret informed a narrative about the initial December she and Vincent spent in a tiny apartment with a secondhand vegetation. Iris propped her device against a candle and made all of us compress together on the furniture for a group photograph. My facial features damaged from smiling, but for once it wasn't the brittle smile I wore at my parents' dining surface. It was something softer, truer. Much later, after the dishwasher hummed in the background and most of the dwelling had gone quiet, I discovered myself alone in the kitchen. The counters were mostly cleared. A singular strand of festive decoration reflected in the dark, transparent barrier over the basin. I picked up my device from where I had departed it near the morning brew creator. The display illuminated up my hand. There was a new message from an unfamiliar numeral. No identifier, just the digits of a Wisconsin region code I understood excessively well. I tapped it open. It was from Father. The words were short. He inscribed that he had discovered a flight. He inscribed that he would land in Atlanta late the next afternoon. He inscribed that he desired to communicate, and that he would arrive to the dwelling whether I responded him or not. I stared at those lines until they blurred. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I didn't inscribe back. Instead, I set the device down, display facing the counter, and turned off the kitchen illumination. The dwelling fell into a softer darkness, illuminated exclusively by the vegetation in the corner of the living chamber and a nightlight in the corridor. As I walked toward my sleeping chamber, the surface cool under my bare feet, I could feel the weight of the arriving day settling around me, not as a crushing thing, but as something heavy I would have to pick up and carry. In my chamber, I closed the entrance gently and occupied on the edge of the sleeping platform. The sound of the Atlantic filtered through the transparent barrier like a constant respiration. For the initial occasion and a long duration, I didn't feel like an offspring bracing for a tempest. I felt like a female who had selected this dwelling, these individuals, this existence. Tomorrow, my father will walk into it. And for once, he would be the one on unfamiliar territory. I woke up before the sun even thought about rising, long before anyone else in the dwelling commenced moving. The atmosphere still held that early morning chill, the variety that slipped under the entrance frames no matter how warm the remainder of the coastal residence was. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling cooling apparatus, turning slow circles above me, waiting for my heartbeat to settle into something constant. But it never accomplished. Father was on his manner, not in the abstract manner he had been for years, floating somewhere on the edge of my existence. He was physically arriving, flying into Atlanta sometime late tonight. The thought pressed against my ribs like something attempting to break out. I finally occupied up, pressed my hair back, and forced myself out of sleeping platform. The corridor was quiet, just the hum of the cooling storage somewhere in the distance. It felt like I had slipped into the dwelling before it fully woke, like I had a moment alone with the bones of it before the day commenced. By the occasion I walked into the kitchen, Margaret was already there, stirring something in a heavy blue pot. The detection of cinnamon and apples drifted toward me. "Quality morning, honey," she stated without turning around. "You are up early. Everything is all correct." I didn't desire to falsehood to her. Not after everything she had opened up about last evening. "I barely slept," I stated. "My father transmitted just before midnight." She exhaled softly. The variety of exhalation someone makes when they comprehend something excessively well. "He is genuinely arriving then." I nodded. "Late tonight. If the flight doesn't obtain delayed or canceled or rerouted, celebration travel is a disorder." Margaret turned off the stove and slid the pot to the back burner. "Desire some breakfast, or do you require morning brew initially?" "Morning brew," I stated. "Definitely morning brew." While she extended for the vessel, I walked to the transparent barrier and observed the faintest pink commence to stretch across the liquid. It was peaceful in the manner early mornings are peaceful, but inside me, everything churned like the Atlantic beneath a tempest. One by one, the remainder of the dwelling woke up. Constance arrived into the kitchen in her pale green robe, offering a modest apologetic smile. Tessa shuffled in wearing one of Iris's ridiculously oversized sweatshirts. Iris, bright-eyed as consistently, announced she had slept wonderfully. And did anyone desire pancakes? Nobody requested about my father in front of the others. They were careful with me, like they comprehended that identifying the thing excessively early might crack me correct down the center. By mid-morning, the coastal residence was animate again. Music operated low through the speakers. The detection of fried bacon drifted from the stove. Someone opened the sliding entrances to let in the warm atmosphere, and the sound of the waves folded into the noise of breakfast communication. For a little while, I let myself feel normal. We spent the early afternoon walking along the waterline. The liquid was warm around our ankles, and the coastal area clung to our feet. Constance communicated about a volume she had just read. Tessa pointed out every seashell that observed vaguely heart-shaped. Iris collected driftwood for a makeshift centerpiece she stated she would construct. Later, it almost felt like the variety of December I had dreamed of when I was younger, the variety I thought would save us somehow. But every few minutes, the same thought extracted through me like a thread. Tonight, sometime tonight, Father will land in Atlanta. We consumed an early dinner outside while the atmosphere shifted from blue to gold. The breeze softened, and the whole existence seemed to tilt into something gentle. For a moment, I could pretend nothing was arriving, that tomorrow would observe just like today, that the individuals at this surface were the exclusive bloodline that mattered. But when the sun dipped behind the liquid, I felt it again, the tightening in my stomach, the familiar ache of anticipation mixed with apprehension. The same experiencing I used to obtain occupying in the back seat of the vehicle on the long drive dwelling from educational institution events, understanding Father had barely observed at me the whole evening. Around 8 in the evening, Owen stepped out onto the platform to check his device. When he arrived back in, he discovered me alone in the kitchen rinsing dishes. "Everything quality?" I requested. He shook his head once. Then he held up his device. His flight landed early, 10:47 in the evening. That is less than 3 hours from now. 3 hours. My hand stilled under the operating liquid. I nodded gradually. That is sooner than I expected. Owen stepped closer. "You don't have to meet him alone," he stated. "Vocalize the word, and I will stand correct beside you. Or you don't have to meet him at all. You can remain in your chamber. You can depart the dwelling. You can take a walk on the coastal area until he departs away." I set the plate on the rack and turned off the faucet. "Negative," I stated quietly. "I am not disappearing this occasion. He desires to communicate. I will communicate, but I will accomplish it on my terms, not his." Owen studied my facial features for a moment, then nodded. "I will be within auditory range just in case." I appreciated that more than I could vocalize. The next hour crawled by. Every vehicle that passed outside made my pulse jump. Every set of footsteps arriving down the corridor made my respiration catch. Constance set out more candles even though we didn't require them. Margaret kept wiping the same counter. Tessa contacted her sibling twice. Iris paced the living chamber with a throw blanket wrapped around her shoulders like she was waiting for some cosmic announcement. No one requested me if I was certain about any of this. They had witnessed sufficient of my narrative to understand I had made my selection. At 9:30, I finally went to my chamber to transform into something comfortable, but presentable. A soft blue sweater, clean jeans, my hair extracted back loosely. I didn't desire to observe fragile, but I didn't desire to observe armored either. I just desired to observe like myself. At 10:10, my device buzzed. A singular line. Landed. No other words. I stared at it for a long second. Then I slipped my device into my pocket and walked out to the main chamber. The illumination devices cast a warm glow on the barriers. My guests occupied scattered across the furniture and chairs. Quiet now, observing me the manner individuals observe a tide extracting out excessively distant. "He is here," I stated. No one moved. No one respired. Then gradually I walked toward the front entrance and pressed my palm against the cool metal handle. I took one long respiration, then another, and I opened it. The evening atmosphere rushed in, but he wasn't there yet. The driveway was empty, just a quiet street, a warm breeze, a moment that held its respiration with me. I stepped out onto the summit of the steps and waited, understanding that somewhere in the dark, his rental vehicle was making its manner down this quiet Georgia road, carrying all the years we had never communicated about, all the pain that never had a location to depart, all the words he thought he would finally vocalize when he reached me. I stood there bracing myself while the warm wind lifted my hair, and the sound of the Atlantic rose behind me. He was close, closer than he had been in a long duration, and the next few minutes were about to transform everything. I remained there, observing the road, waiting for headlights to appear. Headlights finally appeared at the distant end of the road. A slow approach, constant and unhurried, like the driver was attempting to gather himself before reaching the dwelling. I stood at the summit of the steps with my hands resting lightly on the rail, willing my respiration to remain even. Behind me, the coastal residence glowed with soft illumination, the hush of my guests pressing gently against the silence outside. No one arrived to the entrance. They were providing me space, but I could feel their presence like a quiet net, prepared to catch me if I faltered. The vehicle turned into my driveway and rolled to a stop. The engine went still for a long moment. Nothing occurred. Then the driver entrance cracked open, and my father stepped out. He observed older than the last occasion I had witnessed him. The Georgia evening atmosphere pressed his jacket back a little, as he stood there attempting to discover the words that had probably rehearsed themselves the entire extended flight. He raised his eyes to me, not angry, not triumphant, not even defensive, just exhausted and unsure in a manner I had never witnessed before. "Harper," he stated softly. His voice traveled the short distance between us and settled correct under my ribs. I walked down one step, then another, until we were exclusively a few feet apart. "I obtained your communications," I stated. "All of them." He grimaced at that. "I determined you might. I was fearful you wouldn't pick up if I attempted again." "I didn't pick up," I stated. My voice remained level. I wasn't prepared to communicate. He nodded like he deserved that. Maybe he accomplished. A breeze lifted from the Atlantic and passed between us. The sound of the waves rose and fell like a slow heartbeat. He cleared his throat. "I witnessed the photographs. All of them. You observed content. Everyone observed content. More content than I have witnessed in a long duration. You were not supposed to witness them," I stated. "Not that soon." He let out a long respiration. Individuals were communicating about it back-dwelling. Religious institution individuals, adjacent residents. "Your sibling witnessed them initially. She contacted your mother. Your mother contacted me. Then everyone contacted everyone. And all I could think was that you were down here constructing something quality, and I had not been invited into any part of it." He paused just for a blink, then added, "I think it damaged my pride more than anything." There it was. The authenticity he had consistently dressed up as concern or tradition or order. Pride. I crossed my arms, but not out of fury, more out of an aged pattern of self-protection. "You informed me this occasion was for genuine bloodlines exclusively. That is what you transmitted. That is what you transmitted." He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were glassy in the entrance illumination. I stated that without thinking, without considering how it would sound to you. I have been accomplishing that for a long duration. Communicating initially, thinking second. You deserved better. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of clarity. You understood I would fly dwelling, I stated. You understood I consistently accomplished. You understood I would make the trip even if the roads were severe or the airports packed. And you still transmitted that communication. He rubbed the back of his neck like the weight of years had gathered there. I thought you had your own existence now. Substantial occupation, substantial success. You consistently seemed distant away, like you didn't require us anymore, like Lydia and the males required us more. There was that familiar sting, the aged hierarchy, the aged order. I have my own existence, I stated. I have been constructing it for a long duration, without much from you, but requiring individuals is not the same as requiring approval. He observed down at the gravel under his feet. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stated, "I am sorry, Harper. Truly, I understand I damaged you. Not just this occasion, for years. Maybe for most of your existence. I don't understand how to undo any of that. But I arrived here because I required you to hear it from me, an individual." His voice cracked just a fraction. "I am sorry." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was just full. Full of things we had never stated. Full of years I had spent attempting to estimate at his affection instead of hearing it plainly. I glanced toward the coastal residence. In the transparent barrier, I witnessed a faint movement. Margaret extracted a curtain just sufficient to check on me. Iris passed by with a vessel in her hands. Owen leaning against the entrance frame, observant, but letting me handle it. They were my individuals, my selected circle, the ones who appeared up because they desired to, not because they felt obligated. Father followed my gaze, and his eyebrows lifted slightly. "Observes like you have a full dwelling," he stated. "I accomplish," I responded simply. He nodded. "They seem to care about you. They accomplish." He observed back at me, and for the initial occasion in my existence, he seemed to be standing on the outside of my existence instead of at the center of it. "Can I arrive in?" he requested finally. I exhaled gradually. I felt the authenticity settle inside me like a constant stone. "Not tonight," I stated. His shoulders tensed. Then he nodded once, accepting the boundary, even if he didn't appreciate it. "I arrived a long manner," he stated. "I didn't expect to hear negative. I had to vocalize it," I replied. "For me." He pressed his lips together and observed at the territory again. The entrance illumination glinted off his glasses. When he observed back up, something like comprehension flickered across his facial features. I witnessed that and I respect it. My torso tightened. I had waited decades to hear that tone. Not control, not disappointment. Something closer to recognition. "You can discover a hotel in municipality," I stated quietly. "Atlanta has plenty, even on celebrations. We can communicate tomorrow morning if you still desire to." He nodded again. Slower, this occasion. Like he was learning how to move in a new existence. "I will accomplish that. I just required to understand you were willing to communicate." I heard myself vocalize. "I am willing. But on my terms, Father." He swallowed and nodded. "On your terms." He stepped back toward the vehicle, opened the entrance, then paused. "Joyful December, Harper," he stated. I let a long respiration out. "Joyful December, Father." He obtained in the vehicle and drove away, the tail illuminations disappearing down the quiet Georgia road. I observed until the darkness swallowed them completely. Exclusively then did I turn back toward the warm glow of the coastal residence. Inside, the dwelling was waiting. My individuals were waiting. My existence was waiting. But before I could walk back through that entrance, the sound of a device buzzing against wood reached me from inside. A second later, I heard Constance contact my identifier. Not in panic, but with urgency. I stepped forward, my respiration catching, understood that whatever communication had just arrived in would tilt tomorrow into a whole new direction. Constance was standing near the coffee surface when I stepped back inside, her device in her hand, her facial features a little paler than it had been on the platform. The others had gone quiet in that particular manner individuals accomplish when they understand something is occurring, but are attempting not to crowd it. She lifted her eyes to me. "This one is for you," she stated softly. "From Lydia." My stomach tightened. I took the device. The message was short, but felt like it ran a distance long through my torso. "Is it authentic? Father informed you exclusively genuine bloodline this occasion? Everybody at religious institution is communicating. The pastor requested what occurred. Mother cried in the parking area. Individuals think we expelled you off." Another communication followed almost on summit of it. I didn't understand he transmitted that message. I exclusively discovered out when the photograph appeared up. "Father is losing it, attempting to control the narrative." I let out a slow respiration. There it was. Justice. Modest and sharp. For years, he had shaped the narrative of who I was in that municipality. Now another narrative had slipped out without his permission. Carrying on a simple photograph of a female standing with the individuals who loved her on a coastal area in Georgia. I handed the device back to Constance. "Thank you," I stated. "I will respond her tomorrow." "You don't have to accomplish any of this tonight," she stated. "Consume something. Occupy with your individuals. Let his selections occupy with him for a while." So that is what I accomplished. We didn't pretend everything was normal, but we also didn't let his arrival swallow the evening. Owen poured morning brew for whoever desired it. Tessa positioned on a silly celebration motion picture and muted it, leaving it to flicker in the background like a moving painting. Iris stretched across the surface with a blanket and informed a long narrative about a disastrous camping trip that had us all laughing in spite of ourselves. At some point, the knot in my torso loosened just sufficient for me to respire without thinking about it. Eventually, the dwelling grew quiet, one entrance closing after another as my guests went to sleeping platform. In my own chamber, I lay conscious for a long duration, absorbing to the waves and the faint hum of the atmosphere conditioner. I thought about all the years I would have accomplished anything for my father to appear up like this, to cross a state line just to witness me, to vocalize he was sorry. Then I thought about the manner he had requested me to repair the narrative for him, to stand in that Wisconsin religious institution as evidence that everything was acceptable. I realized that sometimes the thing you have requested for all your existence finally appears, and by the occasion it accomplishes, you have outgrown the version of yourself that would have grabbed it at any cost. At some point, I slept. When I woke, the illumination was soft and gray, the dwelling still quiet. I dressed in a simple shirt and jeans, tied my hair back, and created morning brew before anyone else arrived into the kitchen. Around 900 in the morning, my device buzzed on the counter. A new communication from an unfamiliar numeral, but I understood who it was. "I am at a dining establishment up the road," it stated. "Your relative informed me the identifier last evening. Can we communicate this morning?" I stared at the display for a moment, then typed back. "You can arrive by at 1000. We can occupy on the back outdoor space." I hit transmit before I could transform my consciousness. When I informed Constance and Owen, they didn't argue. They just rearranged the morning around me. Margaret took Iris for a walk on the coastal area. Tessa and Martin volunteered to operate to the little store for more frozen liquid and fruit. By 10, the dwelling felt empty sufficient that I understood nobody would wander outside and stumble into something they couldn't unhear. I set dual vessels on the outdoor surface and occupied with my back to the Atlantic. The sound of the waves at my shoulders like a hand of support. The atmosphere was a pale, clear blue. The atmosphere smelled like brine and sun-warmed wood. At 10:15, I heard the knock at the front entrance. A minute later, Father stepped out through the sliding glass entrance, observing smaller somehow in daylight. He glanced at the Atlantic, then at the chairs, then at me. "Mind if I occupy?" he requested. I nodded toward the chair across from me. He lowered himself into it and wrapped his hands around the vessel like he required its warmth more than I accomplished. He cleared his throat. I remained quiet, letting the silence accomplish some of the work. "The religious institution was rough yesterday," he stated finally. "Individuals had all varieties of ideas about where you were and why the bloodline was here without you. Somebody demonstrated your mother that photograph your relative posted, the one with the caption about bloodline." He stated the word like it was foreign. "Heavy." "I heard," I stated. "Constance demonstrated me Lydia Communications." His jaw tightened at the mention of my sibling, then loosened again. "The pastor extracted us aside after the service. He stated requested if you were all correct. Requested if we had stated or accomplished something that made you feel like you didn't belong." Your mother cried. I didn't have a quality response. He observed at me, then genuinely observed like he was attempting to witness more than whatever version of me he had carried in his consciousness for decades. "You have any idea what it experiences like to be extracted aside like that?" he requested quietly. "To have individuals observing at you like you have failed at the one thing you were supposed to accomplish correct?" I almost laughed. The sound arrived out as a rough respiration instead. "I understand precisely what it experiences like," I stated. "I spent most of my childhood experiencing like I had failed at being the variety of offspring you desired." He grimaced as if I had extended a cross and struck him. "I didn't arrive all this manner to combat," he stated. "I arrived because I cannot stand the thought of individuals thinking I don't love my own offspring." I leaned forward for maybe the initial occasion in my existence. My voice arrived out steadier than his. "Do you love me?" I requested. "Me. Not the idea of me. Not the me who fits into your December card photograph. The genuine offspring occupying in front of you who departed dwelling to construct an existence you never requested about." His eyes glistened. "Of course I accomplish," he stated. "I have consistently loved you. I just didn't understand what to accomplish with you. You were different. Lydia was easy. You were not." A sad variety of clarity moved through me. "You are correct." I stated I am different. I consistently have been. And I spent years thinking that if I accomplished sufficient, earned sufficient, provided sufficient, you might witness me the manner you witnessed her. He pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. "When I transmitted that message about genuine bloodline," he stated, "I was thinking about the noise, the offspring, the manner your mother obtains overwhelmed. I didn't think about the words. I didn't think about how they would hit that little female you used to be. I thought you would shrug it off, make your own plans, arrive at Easter instead. I didn't think you would invite everyone else here." He shook his head once. "But witnessing those photographs demonstrated me something," he added. "You didn't just make other plans. You made something beautiful without us." The Atlantic roared behind me. A soft, constant applause. He observed out toward the liquid. "They are all communicating back-dwelling," he stated, "but not like I expected. A couple of females from religious institution informed your mother they were proud of you. Stated they wished they had been as brave when they were younger. My aged fishing associate requested why he had never heard about your organization about this dwelling. He observed at me like I had been asleep for 20 years. That was his consequence." I realized not some dramatic public shaming, just a slow unraveling of the image he had curated thread by thread, as individuals realized he had departed parts of his own narrative out. He took a respiration. "I requested you last evening to arrive dwelling and stand beside us," he stated, "to make it observe like everything was acceptable. That was incorrect. That was for me, not for you. I witness that now. I didn't vocalize anything. I just waited." He forced himself to meet my eyes. "So, I am not going to request you to accomplish that," he stated. "I am exclusively going to request one thing. If there is a manner for us to have something different from here on out, I desire that. Even if it is smaller than what I thought it would observe like. Smaller, honest, imperfect." The word slid into position inside me. "This is what I can offer," I stated. "I can remain in contact. I can contact on celebrations. I can visit if I feel respected. But I am not going to pretend anymore. I am not going to stand in a religious institution just to repair a narrative for you. And if you ever transmit me a communication like that again, you will not hear from me for a long duration." He flinched. then nodded. That is fair. I also desire you to hear this, I added. You cannot threaten to expel me off. You already accomplished that when you decided I didn't count as genuine bloodline this occasion. You cannot disown someone you never fully claimed. We occupied with that for a long moment. He swallowed hard. The muscles in his jaw worked like he was chewing on every word. Finally, he stood. I should let you obtain back to your guests, he stated. I obtained a chamber near the airport. I will fly out tonight. He observed around the outdoor space once more at the perspective of the liquid at the chairs waiting for individuals who had selected me with no conditions. You accomplished quality, he stated almost to himself. With this location, with those individuals. Thank you, I responded. I accomplished it without you. He nodded once, accepting that as fact rather than accusation. Then he walked back through the dwelling, offered a brief hello and goodbye to whoever crossed his path, and departed. I observed him depart down the steps and along the section of the dwelling. I stood there until the sound of his rental vehicle faded down the road, and the exclusive thing I could hear again was the Atlantic and the distant amusement from the living chamber. Later that afternoon, my device buzzed with a new communication from Lydia. Father informed me what you stated, she inscribed. I understand it is not my position, but I am glad you finally accomplished. I am sorry for the part I performed. I used to feel special being the preferred. Now I just feel modest. If you ever desire a sibling relationship that is not built on that age disorder, I am willing to attempt. Another from Mother arrived that evening. I witnessed the photographs from Georgia again, she inscribed. Margaret transmitted me some. You observe content. I hope someday I am brave sufficient to occupy at that surface with you. I am sorry for the manners I failed you. I am not prepared to vocalize it audibly yet in front of everyone, but I can vocalize it here. Aged me would have rushed to respond correct away, smoothing and patching and reassuring. This version of me took a walk on the coastal area initially, let the tide roll in and out around my ankles while the atmosphere turned pink and orange overhead. I observed Constance and Iris collect shells down the coastal area. I witnessed Owen skipping rocks with Vincent. I heard Tessa informing Martin a wild narrative in that rolling accent. My existence here now is full. Then I occupied on a driftwood log and typed gradually. To Lydia, I inscribed that I was willing to witness what a new variety of sisterhood could observe like, one conversation at an occasion. To Mother, I inscribed that I heard her, that her words mattered, and that I would be open to communicating more when she was prepared to accomplish it without pretending. The next day, my guests commenced to depart. One vehicle service at an occasion. There were long embraces at the entrance, promises to arrive back next year. Leftover containers pressed into hands for the flight's dwelling. Margaret kissed my facial feature and informed me to consistently keep extra butter in the cooling storage. Tessa made me swear we would turn this into a tradition. Constance held me the longest, and whispered that she was proud of me, in a manner that had nothing to accomplish with occupation titles or dwellings. After the last luggage went into the trunk, and the final vehicle extracted away, the coastal residence fell quiet again. But it was a different quiet than the one I had understood before. This one was full of echoes. Amusement in the barriers, footsteps in the corridor, the memory of a surface where everyone had a seat. That evening, I occupied on the platform with a blanket around my shoulders and observed. The moon lay a silver path across the liquid. My device rested beside me, display dark. For once, I didn't feel the urge to check who might be contacting or what crisis might be waiting. I thought about that initial message from my father. This occasion, it was just a genuine bloodline. I thought about the 18 attempts he had thrown into the void when he realized he couldn't control the narrative anymore. I thought about the quiet manner I had finally informed him negative, and observed the age dynamic crack correct down the middle. Individuals think revenge has to be loud, slamming entrances, shouting matches, public scenes. But occupying there with the evening wrapped around me, and the Atlantic respiring steadily at my back, I realized my revenge had been much quieter than that. I constructed an existence that didn't require his approval. I selected individuals who selected me back. I stopped performing. I let his words occupy with him instead of rushing to extract them out of his hands. Sometimes the loudest thing you can accomplish is vocalize nothing and keep living well. If you have ever been informed you were excessively much or not sufficient for your own bloodline, remember this: silence can be power, and authenticity can be the loudest revenge. Inform me in the commentaries what integrity means to you and where you are absorbing.